Hey, what's up, guys? Leo. So let's talk about the zero income tax that Trump's been proposing and its feasibility. Can it actually happen? Can you impose tariffs and then there be no income tax for anyone in America? Now, there's a lot of talk about concerns of it causing inflation. And, it's a very valid concern to have. I actually think that it is a small piece to a much larger picture, a much larger end goal for where the United States economy is headed. And I think that we're leading into a new industrial boom within our economy. But before we get into all of that, hit that subscribe button. I promise I'm going to be delivering lots of value to you guys coming down the road. A couple things before we get into it. Given the holidays are coming up, my videos are going to be a little more sporadic. I'm going to be doing some traveling for the holidays, visiting family. Family is just really important to me. So I encourage you all to do the same. It's always good to spend time with family and, spend time with your loved ones. Okay, so let's get into it. First, I want to explain exactly what a tariff is so that we're all on the same page here. So whenever a company imports goods from, let's say, China, the goods come into the port and then they are charged a tariff. Now, who gets charged that? It's kind of a misconception. It's not the foreign country that ends up having to pay that. It's actually the U.S.-based company that pays that whenever they accept delivery of their items at the port. So, for example, let's say that you import an item worth $100 and there's a 10% tariff. That means that the company that is importing the goods in the U.S., so U.S. company importing goods from China, they would pay a $10 tariff. Now, that basically means that the total costs for that product that they're importing is now $110, to which they are now going to go and sell that to a consumer. So that's one side of tariffs. The other side of the tariffs is that they're a tool for the government to use to incentivize behavior and really to level the playing field for different companies across the globe. So for example, let's say that Apple wants to build an iPhone, and currently they can do that in China for $500. Well, if the government wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States, what are they going to do? They're going to impose a 100% tariff on that country. And now the total cost for that good goes from $500 to $1,000. If you're able to produce that same good in America for $1,000, well, now you have an equal playing field. And why would you import something whenever you can just build it in the US? So now let's talk about, can it actually be done? Can you use tariffs? In this case, a 10% tariff, or in some cases like Mexico and Canada, they're talking about a 25% tariff. But would that be enough money in order to completely replace the total income tax for the United States? Well, in 2023, the total income tax revenue that the government brought in was $4.4 trillion. Now, the total amount of goods that we imported for that same year across the globe was $3.8 trillion. So a 10% tariff on $3.8 trillion only equates to $380 billion. That doesn't add up with the 4.4 trillion in revenue that the government needs. But here's the catch, because a lot of people are talking about, it can't be done, et cetera, because, it's not enough revenue. And at face value, yes, they are correct. There's not enough money brought in just from a 10% tariff. But I want to show you something. So we take a look here. This is basically just examples of wasteful government spending. And this is where DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is going to come into play. Some of these are just hilarious. So United States government allocated $1.5 million to research yoga for goats. Yeah, that seems like a real good use of taxpayer money. Here's another one that's just hilarious. I tweeted about this earlier. They spent $3 million to study hamsters on steroids fighting. Okay, it gets better. Let's see, we've got $518,000 was spent on the sex life of Japanese quails on cocaine. So these are just kind of some of the funny examples here that we have. But the point that I'm trying to get across is that there is a massive amount of government waste. We don't know how much it is, but it's not uncommon to see things like this. I remember seeing stories about how the government was paying for military contractors. It was something like $45 per screw. And then I saw like $6,000 for a toilet. So, and really, you can't even call it wasteful spending at that point. It's just laundering taxpayer money into corporation hands. And that's really what it is. They're just stealing from the American people and funneling it into corporations and special interests because, you get a little handshake here and they support you in the campaign. The politician gets elected. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble. So I think that's what people don't take into account is if the DOGE department is able to reduce government spend, all this government waste significantly, then it's very possible that we could see zero income tax in America because of all the savings that Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to be able to do. And, maybe it's not even a full zero income tax. So, for example, half of the taxes in America come from corporations and half of them come from individuals. So maybe they're able to reduce government wasteful spending to a point where you could impose the 10% tariff and individuals pay zero income tax, but corporations still do to make up some of the revenue that the government needs. So it's not impossible. And the other side of the argument is that they say, well, the cost of goods are going to go up because of inflation, because of the tariff. And yes, that is true. Unfortunately, poo-poo rolls downhill. So as a company brings in a product, let's say, again, the $100 example, you have the 10% tariff. So now your product costs the company $110. That extra 10% is going to be carried on to the consumer. But if the consumer is not having to pay any income taxes, it kind of balances out a little bit. But what it really does is it shifts the economic incentives for companies to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And I think this plays in a much bigger role with Elon Musk and Tesla than people are realizing. So America is going to run into a problem where we are running out of jobs because AI and automations and the Optimus robot are essentially going to replace a lot of jobs whenever it comes to like manufacturing. They talk about, if you haven't seen my Tesla video, go check it out. I think it's the best trade in the market right now, other than maybe Ethereum. So now if we see a massive job destruction due to these robots coming out, where are the jobs going to come from? Because you still have a lot of people that need to be able to work. They need something to do on a daily basis. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to see an industrial boom in the United States, and it's going to be driven by the Optimus robot, because the Optimus robot is going to allow us to compete with China and a lot of the Southeast Asian countries because their labor costs are so incredibly low. Right now, we can't compete. But if manufacturing companies in the United States are able to leverage the Optimus robot to bring their labor costs down to $1, $2, then what that opens the door for is it opens up a lot more jobs in new manufacturing that's going to be done as a result of us bringing it all back home to the United States instead of it being over in these Southeast Asian countries. And, I really don't think it's that far-fetched that this could be what they are planning, especially with Elon Musk being so close with the president-elect. I'm sure he's whispering in his ears, he's thinking about his robot, how can I get more influence and get sales? Well, they estimate 25 million manufacturing jobs are going to be destroyed by robots like Optimus. And so the only way that you can fix that situation is by creating more manufacturing jobs. Because with the robot, they're still going to need supervision, they're going to need maintenance, they aren't at a point where they can just run themselves. But if you bring back a ton of manufacturing, and then that's going to grow the United States GDP, which helps us deal with our national debt. So if you cut spending by half, 80%, whatever they're able to do, and then you see manufacturing come back to the United States, we see this huge industrial boom where we start exporting goods to emerging markets like Brazil, India. As these countries start to advance and become more like a first world country, they're going to have all the consumer needs that we do. So do we want to position ourselves in a situation where the United States is able to capitalize on that by providing these goods to those countries? The US, we used to be known for making not only products, but we made the best products, some of the best. Made in America used to be a thing that growing up, my grandfather, he was very proud of. Actually, a lot of my grandfather, I have more than one I was fortunate enough to actually know my great grandfather. But the point is, the old timers, they understand that made in America used to mean something. And the only reason that we don't have that today is because of labor costs. Other countries are able to do it so much cheaper, but Optimus robots bring down those labor costs, then we can compete at a global scale again. And what this also would mean is that as we export more and more goods, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time for U.S. manufacturers to build out their plants because we don't really have the infrastructure right now to really scale things up, but it's a stepping stone. So as they scale out, what that's going to do, and we export to more of these countries, it's going to grow the country's GDP. And growing our GDP helps us manage the national debt. Because if we're able to move away from it and cut spending, we can actually start seeing the debt come down. Because as these companies begin to export more and more goods, for example, like we talked about, the corporations could still pay an income tax. Now governments are actually paying more, or they're actually getting more in revenue because they grew their GDP, right? At the expense of doing the tariff thing, they were able to expand overall GDP and pay down the debt from an increase in exports, which resulted in an increase in corporate income taxes. Now, I mean, for me personally, this just gives me more confidence in the Tesla trade because I see massive demand for these bots. If I'm a company and I'm able to reduce my labor costs drastically down to $1 or $2, I would be insane not to take that opportunity. So there's no way that Elon Musk doesn't sell hundreds of millions, if not billions. And that's what he's talked about. He's talked about he's going to sell billions of these things across the globe. So I don't see a way that trade doesn't play out. I currently think that Tesla's going to do 10 to 20x. And I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at the numbers and if you think about the economic value of what these robots can essentially bring to the table in terms of increasing company profits, increasing prosperity for the average consumer, the standard of living for the average person in America is just going to skyrocket. And seeing how leveraging that cheap labor can increase the country's GDP overall as we are able to do more exports. There's no way that these Optimus robots are just a novelty item. They're going to become a standard industrial use product. It's a very bright future, and I know that it seems a little bit utopian, but I don't see another path. I think this is the path they're going to go. I'm convinced of it. But anyway, until next time, I will talk to y'all soon. I hope if I don't talk to y'all again before the holidays, since I'll be traveling, visiting family, I will see y'all again in the beginning of January. And until then, y'all have a Merry Christmas and take care.